Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today we are taking a detailed look at memory scaling and memory tuning performance with AMD's Ryzen 7000 series. Now recently I compared the Ryzen 7 7700X and Core i9 13900K using a range of memory and found that while Zen 4 does perform really well with premium low latency DDR5 6000, gaming performance does drop off quite considerably with lower clocked, higher latency memory such as affordable DDR5 5200 for example. So in this video, I want to take an even deeper look at memory performance with Zen 4 and even test some manually tuned configurations to see just how much extra performance those of you willing to tinker around in the BIOS can extract. We've got over a dozen individual memory configurations to go over, including 4 manually tuned configurations. Now, to save me a lot of time and messing around, I reached out to renowned overclocker Buildzoid from the Actually Hardcore Overclocking YouTube channel for some help. Buildzoid was willing to help and sent over what he calls his low effort single rank Hynix A/M die timings, which he says should work with any of the currently available Hynix based DDR5 kits at DDR5 6000. For those of you interested, here's what those timings look like, and for comparison I've included the G-Skill Trident Z5 Neo RGB DDR5 6000 CL30, Corsair Dominator Platinum DDR5 6000 CL30, and Kingston Fury Beast DDR5 6000 CL40 memory. There's more than half a dozen other kits included featuring various frequencies and timings, and we'll go over all of that data in a moment. But before we do, please note that the Ryzen 7 7700X and GeForce RTX 4090 were used for this testing on the Gigabyte X670 Aorus Master motherboard using the latest F8 BIOS supporting a GSAT 1.0.0.4, and that motherboard is relevant as the motherboard's responsible for configuring quite a few of the memory timings. Okay, let's get into the data. Right, so bear with me as we go over these results. I know there's a lot of data points here, but we should be able to make sense of it. Firstly, the tuned results will jump out at you as they're highlighted in yellow. And the first highlighted result is for the DDR5 6000 CL30 kit that we use for all of our Zen 4 testing, but with Buildzoid's timings applied. When compared to the stock configuration on the Aorus Master, the manually tuned timings improve performance by just 2%. So the G-Skill Trident Z Neo DDR5 6000 CL30 kit is very well tuned out of the box on this board. The Corsair Dominator Platinum DDR5 6000 CL30 kit, not so much though, as performance there dropped by 5%, going from 168 to 160 FPS. Then we have Gigabyte's Aorus RGB DDR5 6000 CL40 memory, which allowed for 149 FPS, and this is the weakest of the DDR5 6000 kits, basically matching Kingston's Fury Beast, both around 11% slower than the G-Skill Trident Z5 Neo. Now we have 4 DDR5 5600 configurations to go over using low latency CL28 memory from G-Skill. It's their Flare X5 stuff. I have the single rank 32GB kit and the dual rank 64GB kit, and while the dual rank kit can be faster, the performance difference is minimal and much smaller than what we see with DDR4, as DDR5 has more ranks to begin with. What's interesting to note here is that Zen 4 appears to struggle with DDR5 5600, even the ultra-low latency memory, as the Infinity Fabric is clocked too low. However, if we manually tune the secondary timings, performance of the dual rank kit is boosted by 12% and the single rank kit by 9%. In fact, it appears, at least in this example, using Watch Dogs Legion, that memory timings are by far the most important factor when it comes to Zen 4's gaming performance. This is evident when looking at the tuned DDR5 5200 configuration, which is clocked 13% lower than the 6000 kits, but with the tighter memory timings is just 5% slower. Not only that, but if we take the G-Skill DDR5 6000 CL30 kit and clock it down to 5200, we're only looking at a 7% reduction in performance. However, if we test with the Corsair Dominator Platinum DDR5 5200 CL40 and CL36 kits, performance does fall away quite dramatically, dropping by up to 10% when compared to the CL30 5200 configuration and 14% from the tuned configuration. Next up we have Hitman 3, and from this point on, we won't pore over all the data for every game, rather I'll just highlight some of the more interesting aspects. For example, we're looking at a low single-digit performance variance between the fastest and slowest tuned memory configurations, so going from 5200 to 6000 netted us just a 3% uplift. However, the stock DDR5 6000 kit saw an 8% variation in performance from the slowest to the fastest kit tested, and this time we're seeing no difference between the single and dual rank DDR5 5600 memory. Now, as we found in the recent Zen 4 versus Raptor Lake memory scaling video, Horizon Zero Dawn isn't at all memory latency sensitive, and that's probably why Ryzen does so well in this game. Whatever the case though, we're looking at just a 9% performance improvement from DDR5 4800 to the tuned 6000 kit, so basically, memory doesn't matter in this test. Oddly though, we do see an improvement with dual rank over single rank memory, albeit a mere 3% uplift, but that's unexpected given the rest of the results. Now, Shadow of the Tomb Raider is a very memory-sensitive game, but it's important to know when you're comparing results from various media outlets that the Shadow of the Tomb Raider built-in benchmark is very bad for testing CPU and therefore memory performance. It's primarily a GPU limited benchmark. Only the village section towards the end of the built-in benchmark starts to stress your CPU, but not enough that it can influence the overall results. So realistically, for testing Shadow of the Tomb Raider, it should be done in-game, and we do that in the village section, which is very CPU demanding. So that's what you're seeing here, not the built-in benchmark results, but rather actual in-game gameplay. And here, the tuned DDR5 6000 CL30 memory resulted in a 5% performance boost. Moreover, we're looking at an 8% increase from CL40 to CL30 DDR5 6000. Now, for those of you willing to tune your memory, the difference between DDR5 5600 CL28 and DDR5 6000 CL30 is basically nothing. At most, the 6000 stuff was a percent faster. In fact, it was just 2.5% faster than the tuned DDR5 5200. So again, it's the memory timings that appear to be the biggest issue for gaming, at least in titles like Shadow of the Tomb Raider. The Riftbreaker is also very sensitive to memory performance, though bandwidth also appears to be at a premium here. In the case of the DDR5 6000 memory, we're seeing a 9% improvement from the CL40 stuff to the tuned CL30 kit, whereas we see a much larger 17% increase from DDR5 5200 CL40 to tuned 5200 CL30. We're also looking at around a 4% improvement when moving from single rank to dual rank memory. A Plague Tale Requiem responds very positively to memory tuning, and we see a number of interesting results here. Firstly, with the DDR5 6000 kits, CL30 memory isn't much faster than CL40, which is at odds with most of the testing we've done so far. Here we're seeing just a 6% improvement for the lower latency CL30 memory. However, tuning that memory boosted performance by 8%, which is one of the biggest gains we've seen for the tuned 6000 memory, and it's quite surprising given what we've seen with the stock configurations. We also see that the CL28 5600 memory responds even better. Here we're looking at a 14% increase from the Expo settings to Buildzoid's manually tuned timings. But once again, once we get down to 5200 speeds, we're looking at just a 2% increase for the tuned profile, at least when looking at the average frame rate, which appears to be bandwidth limited. The 1% lows, though, are still improved by 7%. So both DRAM latency and bandwidth are important for performance in this title. Now, Spider-Man Remastered is a title that we know to be very memory sensitive, and in particular, loves memory bandwidth. Even so, the tuned DDR5 5200 configuration does really well, with 129 FPS on average, making the 6000 configuration 9% faster. Then, if we compare the Expo settings for the 5200 and 6000 CL30 memory, we see a 10% improvement with the higher clocked kit. Still, just buying DDR5 6000 doesn't ensure maximum performance, as we're looking at a 12% increase from the slower CL40 kit to the CL30 kit we use for testing. Also, stock the CL28 5600 kits were quite slow, but once manually tuned, we did see up to a 20% improvement. It's also worth noting that the memory we used for testing was almost 20% faster than a CL36 5200 kit, so a massive difference there, and another clear example that you really need to pay attention to the memory you use with Zen 4. Finally, we have the Callisto Protocol, and this is a new addition to our testing, though here it doesn't appear to be all that memory sensitive. The tuned DDR5 6000 CL30 kit, for example, only improved performance by 2.5%, and we see a similar margin when clocking it at 5200. That said, the CL28 5600 kit did see up to an 8% increase when tuned, so there are some nice gains to be had there. So there you have it. When CPU-bound memory can make a big difference with Zen 4, and with next-gen games seemingly pushing even the faster CPUs to their limits, claiming a game at 4K and therefore CPU performance doesn't matter, it's probably not the best strategy. While it's true that in most instances you will be primarily GPU limited, especially if you play single-player games and are only targeting, say, 60 FPS, but don't be so short-sighted to think that memory performance doesn't matter, because inevitably, before too long, probably will. So getting the right memory could save you in the future, and at the very least, it can lead to a better gaming experience today, which it certainly does in many instances, especially if you're targeting those higher refresh rates. For example, across the 8 games tested, the 7700X was on average 12% faster using DDR5 6000CL30 memory when compared to DDR5 5200CL36. And that's a significant difference, and in select titles that margin was as high as 20%. Now, although this data was collected at 1080p using an RTX 4090, you can expect to see similar margins in multiplayer titles using competitive quality settings, or even demanding single-player games when aiming for, say, 144 FPS or more, as you'd simply lower the visual quality settings to enable that frame rate, making those FPS targets possible with a lesser GPU. At the end of the day, the difference in price between an entry-level DDR5 5200CL40 kit and a good quality DDR5 6000 kit, it's about $30 US, so just do yourself a favor and pick up the higher quality memory. After all, we're not talking about budget builds here, so ensuring maximum performance now and in the future is probably worth such a small investment. Also, if you're really keen on extracting more performance with the memory you do have, manually tuning the timings can be a good way to boost performance. On average, we extracted an additional 10% from the DDR5 5600CL28 kit, and that particular memory cost just $140 US for a 32GB kit. The timings used are also very conservative, or low effort, as Buildzoid would put it. All the Micron kits I tried managed those timings and passed an overnight stress test, though I recommend providing some active cooling if you're going to do this, especially if you plan on stressing them for hours on end, as DDR5 can get rather hot. Also, if you'd like to learn more about memory tuning and overclocking in general, then I highly recommend checking out the Actually Hardcore Overclocking YouTube channel. Buildzoid really knows his stuff. And that is going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching. Again, if you'd like to support the channel, well, first of all, do one of those. Also, we have Floatplane Patreon. Sign up to either one of those things. You'll get access to our exclusive Discord server where, a members-only channel, very cool place to talk tech. Tim and I do a monthly live stream for members. There's behind-the-scenes content, Q&A stuff, a lot of cool things there. So if you're interested, check it out. But if not, that is perfectly fine. And I would like to thank you for watching this video. I'm your host, Steve. See you next time.